Greetings, and welcome to Stuffology, where two old friends sit around and talk BS, Beatles stuff, on a track-by-track basis, pretty much for the sake of it. My name is JG McQuarrie, and I'm here with my co-host Andrew Deacon. Say hi, Andrew.
Hello, you. Hello, Internet. I'm so excited, but not just because the sun is out, the sky is blue, etc., but we have entered into what I think of as being a classic Beatles period. And that's exciting.
I think that is exciting. We are no longer in need of help. Well, I mean that's not strictly true, but we'll move on from that. And we have moved on to a new album, so it's time for Rubber Soul and Drive My Car.
And we're in classic pop, rock, blues territory now, aren't we? Because we have the car as a motif throughout the lyric, which and the car is an amazing thing. I was going to say an amazing vehicle. Yeah, okay. It is an amazing vehicle for metaphors in pop and rock, and I'm sure you could probably find most bands at some point have written a song that includes something to do with cars somewhere. And invariably it's either a status thing or it's a sex thing. And in this case, potentially both.
Well, indeed. Just starting with that, I guess, as a point of, if you excuse the expression, a point of entry into our conversation. Are you convinced by McCartney claiming that Drive My Car is a euphemism for sex?
It can be whatever he wants it to be. That's fine. I suspect that if you were to look at lots of different conversations he might have had about this song over the years, he would have said it's one thing in one and one thing in another. So, if at the moment he wants to claim that, is that what he says in the lyric book, for example?
I think it is,
Okay,
yeah.
then, yeah, fine. I did see a comment somewhere about, stick shift. Era when there were fewer automatic cars. That's fine. But then, remember, at the end of the song, there is no car. There's a driver, but there is no car. So maybe that's evidence that he was talking the truth in that. Whatever, it's fine. I actually think it's.
You almost held that together there. That was pretty
It's
impressive.
fine. It's fine. It's a nice thing to base a song around. And I suppose also then, hopefully in that interview, he was also trying to keep up with the myth of this being a comedy song. It's comedy in the inverted commas sense, in that, like a lot of comedy songs, it's not actually that funny, but that doesn't stop it being a really, really good song. I mean, as far as I can see, the main element of comedy that comes through is the beep, 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 yeah, at the end. But, that's fine. Others may find the humour in it. I just find the rock. Again, I don't know why I'm doing that cheesy voice today. That's just really bad. I will attempt to stop. But there you go. But the cars thing is real, especially, in early rock and roll. There'll be tons of examples, and the Beach Boys would also have been good at this. And there's something sort of symbolic of that kind of American lifestyle, that teenage freedom thing that comes with owning and driving a car, which of course is very different to teenage culture in the UK at the time, where they were scrabbling around to get the bus fare more often than not. So the fact that it kind of ends up with someone being a driver for someone else is probably a little bit reflective of that. If I'm sure in the next volume of McCartney's lyrical endeavours, he might then talk about that and its societal implications. But for the moment, let's move on.
Well, I mean, I think it is a well-constructed lyric. I think it is a very well-written piece. And if it isn't, it isn't quite the rip tickler that maybe Mr. McCartney would wish to make it out to be, it does at least have a proper punchline. Like, it's constructed in that way. And it lands. Yeah, it's exactly that. It's structure. And I really like that. It builds, it goes somewhere. It definitely shows that it's one of the lyrics that he's put a bit more time into, that he's put a bit more effort into. And I think it's the first song in quite a while that I really feel that there's been like a step up, not a gradual sort of iterative improvement, but there's been a step up in the quality of the writing here. It's not falling back on Beach Boys cliches. It's not falling back on kind of like sort of mid 50s, sort of rock and roll cliches. It is a very English kind of way of looking at it, and even if you don't necessarily buy drive my car being a euphemism for sex, it still feels very much in line with, say, Day Tripper being an obvious touchstone, given that it's also about transport, but a conspicuous
Or
improvement
is it?
and step further. Well, yeah, I think it is. I think it is. But if you want to debate the point, please feel free.
Well, no, no, no. You can listen back to our episode on Day Tripper to find out whether or not I cared about the lyrical meaning and of the.
Spoiler, you didn't.
Well, yeah, I mean that wouldn't exactly be unusual, but yeah, it is both the same and different, which I think is important. So, it's taking a an oeuvre which is quite familiar, but it is playing that twist. You know how when thinking about "She Loves You," the whole day, oh wow, it's not "She Loves Me." Oh, can change to "She Loves You." Oh, we're doing something different there. Yeah, yes and no. But this actually feels like a much better example of changing the persona, writing from what potentially a female perspective ish, and just really trying to do something different. Now, I will always then go back and say, well, I think when I first listened to it, and I really bought into the power of the song, I don't think I bothered to work out, right, well, she, he, yeah, that this is the driver, and that's oh yeah, she's going to be a star, and didn't really matter because again, I fall into my, the words just seem to fit and really help with the overall feel of the song. But now I can have a look and go, okay, yeah, there is something going on here that helps it to stand apart from an awful lot of what else is going around at the time. And it's worth pointing out in terms of the lyrics as well, the common assumption is that when McCartney wrote it originally, it was full of those cliched things about diamonds and so on and so forth. And that then when working together with Lennon, they then constructed this lyric once the idea of driving the car came up, the rest of it fell into place reasonably quickly. So I would imagine that there was a little bit of competition between the two of them to see who could then create that lyric and create those lines that were going to be most effective. So if McCartney was driven to I put emphasis on that like I was going for a pun. I really wasn't. Halfway through the I realized, oh God, what am I doing? If he was spurred on to really think about the words here, I suspect it was because of that close proximity to Lennon when they were going over the the pre-recording preparation.
I'd very much agree with that, and I don't think that it's a song which often comes up when people talk about that competitive nature, between Lennon and McCartney. But it seems like it's really driven that way, and if it has pushed the songwriting into much more interesting territory, then that's a good thing. I mean, musically, it's a very yeah. I mean, you mentioned sort of bluesy earlier on. It's a very bluesy song. I was playing it about sort of 10 or 15 minutes before we started recording on guitar, I should say, not just listening to it. And it like the chords are like really simple. It's a really simple song. There's that little riff at the beginning, which is nice. And then it kind of falls into I think it's a D seventh and a G seventh, and then it just kind of sort of floats around that, and then the chorus is slightly different. It's A, D, and G. And it's an effective little song, but because of so much is put into it, in terms of the way that the song is constructed, it never feels like that. The lyric, I mean, it has that kind of very Pythonesque and now the punchline ending, but of course it predates Python, and it's just an effective build of the lyrical structure, but the musical structure is also really straightforward. It is just verse, chorus, break, verse, chorus. Like there's, but like it's if you listen to like McCartney's bass line, it's an astonishingly complex bass line in it. I'm not normally a big fan of recommending like the remixes or whatever, but the 2023 remix for the Red album really brings out the bottom end of that recording and shows off what McCartney's doing. He's still on the Hoofner at this point, but that remix really does make a difference to the song. Suddenly you get to not just get a sense of what the complexity of the bass line is, but it really comes up, but without sort of drowning anything else out. It's a really great piece of work. If you haven't, or if listeners haven't, it's well worth listening to that version of the song on the remixed Red album, because it shows how much McCartney has put into this. This isn't a throwaway. It's not a sort of, okay, well, we've got the lyrics sorted, we'll just throw down some music. Like, there's real complexity in the way that the music is constructed as well as the lyric, and it makes all the difference to the song.
Well, as I believe the great philosophers Bananarama and the Fun Boy Three once sung, "It ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it," and I
Well,
think that that
absolutely.
is the epitome here, because I think the simplicity of it, in some respects, is the one of the key defining features, because you could imagine that. Well, I mean, let's put it this way: we both probably would have heard this for the first time in probably say the second half of the 1980s. So it's probably
Yeah,
fair.
for sure.
And that was at a time when perhaps we weren't as strongly aware of the Beatles outside of the key singles, and the myth of Sergeant Pepper, for example, or even Revolver might have been something that only really came to our attention through some of these greatest album lists of all time. I had a feeling that there was one in the early days of Q magazine, but I can't find that. The earliest one I can find is about 96, I think. But things like Q magazine would have been writing about albums, or people in there would have been talking about influences of things like Revolver, and that would have then been getting some prominence, whereas Rubber Soul perhaps wasn't quite getting the same level of love. So I suspect that I may have come across Rubber Soul around the time that John Lennon biographical film was released, the one that was produced by Yoko Ono, because I'm pretty sure that included In My Life. And then as a result, probably in Beano's in Croydon, I would have picked up a second-hand copy of the cassette of Rubber Soul at the time I was piecing together all of the albums. And then you listen to this. So an awful lot of the album tracks, or an awful lot of the stuff I was listening to at the time, or was in the charts at the time, was very heavily produced. Now, whether that's the not necessarily the stuff I was buying, but the Stock Aitken and Waterman end of things, which are very slick. Oh, but also then, you can listen to quite a bit of the stuff that perhaps Eno was doing with U2 at the time, and even though it's nowhere near the Stock Aitken and Waterman end of things, you can really hear the production. And Steve Lillywhite, in terms of a lot of the the indie pop that was around at the time, again you can sort of get a sense that there is quite a bit of production going on. And then you have more closely Beatles related. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Jeff Lynne, with Cloud Nine and the Wilburys and that Tom Petty album and the Roy Orbison album as well. And therefore, listening to Drive My Car with its empty spaces, with its sort of pared back production, with the fact that quite often you might have the vocals, the drums, and the bass during the verse, for example, it just really stood out as something that had immense power, but also simplicity. And I think so. Therefore, don't know about you. Realize I've banged on quite a lot about this. I'll let you in a sec. Sorry. I think, therefore, even though I might have heard it in, I don't know, 87, 88, 89, something around then, it really stood out in so many ways that was incredibly refreshing compared to the contemporary music at the time.
I think that's yeah, I think that's a really valid observation. I would also have come across this in pretty much the same way, except, I would have picked up my secondhand copy probably from, I don't know, Oxfam and Byres Road in Glasgow or whatever.
Tape
It would have been
Exchange down
would have
on
been some kind of
what was the
equivalent.
record and tape exchange shop that was somewhere down on near Shawlands, I think, wasn't it? Anyway, ignore me.
No, that's fine. I mean, there's plenty of like this missing in the city centre, and I went to the Barrows a lot.
Right.
I used to pick up sort of very dodgy
Yeah.
tapes from the Barrows. It's where I got a lot of like White Album offcuts and ultra rare tracks and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So yeah, so I would have come across it in precisely the same way. And I think that point about the music press is also like an interesting one as well. We've touched on it a little bit before, but particularly when the two main kind of organs of the music press were NME and Melody Maker, they had seething contempt for this kind of old fart music, not just the Beatles, but Floyd and Zeppelin and all of the old guard, all of those kind of bands. And just never wrote about them. It wasn't something that came up. It was only once Q magazine launched, which was
I think so. Yeah.
mid eighties, I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
that you actually started to have a magazine where people were going, oh, actually, like we do still love all the contemporary music that's being written, but it's
Yeah.
not the only music that exists. And then you started to get that sort of retrospective element coming through, people talking about old music, and that's where I came across certainly a lot of information about the Beatles. I have a hugely embarrassing sort of story about going to W.H. Smith's on Argyle Street in Glasgow and buying a copy of the White Album and not realizing it was an album. I thought it was just a compilation. I didn't know. I didn't know what the White Album was. I wasn't aware of it as any kind of an artifact. And sort of looping back round to Rubber Soul, I was certainly aware of it as an album. God, that still makes me cringe beyond words. Anyway, yeah, but I was aware of Rubber Soul as an album, but it felt very underrepresented, especially when it came to things like compilations or best ofs or anything like that. And certainly Drive My Car just didn't exist in that context. So it was, yeah, like you said, very refreshing. It was coming across something that was done in a style, in an idiom that just wasn't something that you and I were being kind of exposed to at that point in time.
I think it's worth reflecting that um, I don't know about you, but I certainly, as a 10, 11-year old, was reading Smash Hits magazine,
Oh,
and then
oh yeah.
and then you know, fast forward a few years, that a couple of the main people behind Smash Hits, David Hepworth, Mark Ellen, then helped launch Q magazine, and then they would have had an impact again a few years later on Mojo as well, which really then sent the whole kind of nostalgia about classic pop and rock going. So we kind of not as our musical taste became a little bit more sophisticated, so was the output that was dedicated to it. Because I think before that you might have to have been looking at something like Record Collector, as the kind of thing, or I mean, probably might have seen the odd edition of Rolling Stone, if you were lucky enough, in central London. In some newsagents might have had a copy, but yeah. So all of that, makes Drive My Car. I mean, there's two things relevant to that. Just feel like, as an album opener, something that just absolutely shines and lays down a marker and says, this is a significant piece of work, which then combine that with the fact that it's about the car, the great American enabler. All the more surprising that it didn't appear on the US version of the album.
Oh yes, the folk version of Rubber Soul. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, like I get contextually why, if you want Rubber Soul to be a folky album, this isn't the song you're going to include in it. But also, like, this is one of the great album openers. This is such a great way to open your album. I mean, sort of talking about how refreshing it felt in the context of the sort of late 80s. It kind of feels refreshing in the context of everything we've gone through from Help, and that's not necessarily to denigrate the material we've listened to in Help, but this just feels like such a step change. It feels refreshing after the material we've been through, and even with We Can Work It Out and Day Tripper, which are essentially contemporaneous. This still feels like such a breath of fresh air, and as such, it's such a perfect choice for the opener.
So let's then suggest that up to this point, and I realise that we're not going to be able to sort of think of this off the top of our heads because there's quite a few albums. This is the best Beatles album track on record so far.
Yeah, I think that. Well,
Or yes, no, then we get into the whole thing about was Yesterday ever a proper single over here and all of that sort of thing.
yeah,
But I mean, I'm bear in mind, we're saying the best Beatles album track up to this point. So therefore, this is track one. It may well be that there is at least one other track on this album that will be even better and that Drive My Car cannot hold a candle to.
it's possible.
Leave that one there.
Um,
We haven't really said much about the song yet. I mean, we said bits, but we started talking about the impact of the opening, and I think the impact of the opening for me is the power of that guitar sound. So I'm going to suggest to you that this is the first instance of what I regard as being, from my view, that classic Beatles guitar sound.
I think that's definitely correct. And Rubber Soul, and yeah, take your lap of honor.
I thought I was being
And
controversial there. I mean,
no, definitely not. I think the guitars sound amazing on this, and Rubber Soul and Revolver form a two-part, pretty much perfect guitar sound. They are stunning, and everybody talks about Rubber Soul in terms of the guitar sound. It's often sort of lauded as being like the best sounding guitars there have ever been, not in Beatles, but in terms of sort of recorded music. And I definitely think that there is a case for that. But again, that leaves Rubber Soul a little bit in Revolver's shadow, and I think it underestimates how good the guitars sound on Rubber Soul. Certainly, Paperback Writer and Rain is often cited as that kind of Revolver sound coming to fruition, which is valid, but again, underestimates the journey that Revolver sort of undergoes to get us to that point. But really, the guitars in this sound amazing. That opening little blues riff, which is not complicated to play, but it's just so effective. Like the stinging little guitar solo in the middle of the song it sounds great. And because there's a slight expansion, we get the piano chords on the chorus and stuff like that. There's enough that there's a contrast there. So we get even the cowbell. There's a cowbell, everybody's favorite. It's adding something. It's just great. But the guitars are really unmatched, I think, in terms of Beatles recording up to this point.
and the solo is, I do think it's magnificent. I am
Oh,
not
I
a big
agree.
fan of guitar solos in general, but the sound and the kind of the fury behind it are fantastic. And the two examples that occurred to me as I was thinking about this are Taxman
Yeah.
and the dueling guitar solos on the end as well. Now, I'm pretty sure this is a Harrison guitar solo on this. I've not seen anything that suggests. I know McCartney does play some guitar on it, but
He plays slide on it, which is kind of interesting. But yeah,
yeah,
Harrison is credited as lead guitarist on it. As far as I'm aware,
which is
it's a Harrison solo.
which of course Taxman is a McCartney solo, isn't it? And I
Yeah.
think the one that I do like on the end is probably the McCartney one as well. So what I'm not doing is saying that I'm trying to amend the old joke about Ringo, not the greatest drummer in the world, not even the greatest drummer in the Beatles. George Harrison, well, not the greatest guitarist in the world, not even the greatest guitarist in the Beatles. Not saying that for a moment, but McCartney has some. Anyway, when we get to Taxman, we'll talk about the McCartney all-round instrumental prowess, perhaps. Yeah, so there's some real energy and drive, and I wonder if they're just realizing now what they're capable of, and really then pursuing that to its full end. It's not like they spend a massive amount of time in the studio on this compared to what they will do in a year's time. It's not as though they're using, all the incredible production techniques that they'll start using in 6 months' time. But there's just that realization in the studio of, by heck, boys, we've got something here.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. Okay, here's a question. Do you think that this is the point where the Beatles become their own thing and cease to be a conflagration of influences?
Well, no, and bearing in mind how close some of this resembles apparently bits of respect. No, I don't think you could probably say that for a while, but I think they're more in control of it, more aware of it, and able to sort of shape it, bend it, um, to their own means, their own ends should be better than means. Yeah. Anyway, that works better. I just think that they're much more in control of. I think they're less um, sort of worried about the pop sensibilities, and so it's more about realizing that we're not just going to chuck in a few songs here and there, with some that stand out and some that are a bit kind of filler. It's more that sense of each song has to really be worth something. Because I think Rubber Soul, I realize we're starting to talk more about Rubber Soul than about Drive My Car. We are starting to remove the work song.
Yeah, definitely. And the cover version as well.
Well, yeah, 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 absolutely. And yeah, underpinning all of this, remember, we've got, I mean, this is a very simple song that sounds amazing. You've already said that in terms of the musicality, in terms of the writing and the chords, it's pretty simple and straightforward. We've said that the production is incredibly effective and not showy. When you the vocals are astonishing
Oh yeah.
on this, and yet the focus, I think, you've got the dueling vocals to an extent, but McCartney, who is much more in the foreground, the focus is more on the power and the energy rather than melody, and it's a power that's more controlled than when he's trying to do his full-on rocker voice, where it sort of then goes into how loud can I be. Here it's a case of how much power can I generate, and therefore how much feeling can I perpetrate throughout the song, and it's just so much more effective.
Yeah, power and volume are not coextensive of each other. Absolutely. And it is I do think we do need to talk about the vocal for a little bit because it is amazing. Like it's the only thing that Lennon really contributes other than tambourine, but it's the only thing that Lennon contributes. He's not playing any other instrument on this, and yet the way that those harmonies work, the way that they are put together, the closeness of it, the construct of it is just it's breathtakingly good.
But not showy.
No, it's not showy at all. It's interesting. Like I mentioned earlier, that I was sort of playing it on guitar before we started recording. I've been playing it for a wee while. It's an annoying song because it always gets stuck in my head. I really love it, but it always gets stuck in my head when I end up listening to it. And trying to sing along with it isn't as easy as you think it might be, and it's because of those split harmonies. It's not following us. It's not a complicated melody, but the split harmonies make it weirdly difficult to just sing along to if you're just doing it in a solo voice. Now, as you are well aware, I don't have a great singing voice, but it's an interesting one to try and sing if you're just sort of singing it without kind of like the background vocals there, if you're like singing along in the car or something. And it's another way that it kind of shows, yeah, it's not flashy, but it's so effective just by splitting that kind of main vocal down the middle, as it were. It's brilliant.
So, but it also suggests that there's something about what's going on around it that really helps everything to coalesce. So, I'll give a couple of examples there. In the first verse, having had the guitar intro, that settles down, and we get the bass line, as you've already referred to, but we also get Ringo quite prominent in the mix, whacking the living daylights out of those drums in a way
Oh
that,
yeah, it's
that
a good Ringo
yeah,
song.
yeah, yeah,
This.
absolutely, absolutely. Even Lennon with the tambourine notwithstanding, um, and then as you're going from the verse into the chorus, you've got that ascending guitar line, which is the link between the two, rather than any kind of melodic range from the singing, and those little bits just seem to contribute to that increasing cleverness, that increasingly astute way of looking at how to construct a song, and just goes to make it one of those that you really can just start to find these amazing little bits that the closer you look. And on quite a few of the songs in some recent albums, Beatles for Sale, side two of Help, for example, you don't have that. They're much more workmanlike.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know if that's because this song had sort of more time in the run up to the writing. I mean, we know there was time pressure for the material and Help because, yeah, they had to
Yeah,
get a film out,
yeah,
and an album to support it. That seems to be less the case here. There seems to be more time available, and it gives them the opportunity to have that extended range of cleverness. And I think we're going to see that a lot when we talk about this album. I don't want to talk about the album too much at this stage, but like if this is the first flourishing of that, then yeah.
I mean, with the recording in October and it's still released in December, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I mean, it's still
Time, relatively speaking.
okay, fair enough. In Beatles terms,
Yes,
yes.
exactly, exactly.
They managed to buy themselves some time by being incredibly successful.
Well, and
Yay.
also by like, I think I'm correct in saying that this is famously the first song where they recorded past midnight, so they've got more actual hours in the studio as well, and that makes a big difference because that time pressure. It's not like, oh well, you get to 10 o'clock and somebody turns out the lights, yeah, no, we'll keep going for now, like that
Yeah.
also. So it's not just about the sort of like the 3 months, it's about the physical hours they're now able to spend in the studio.
Yeah, I wonder. I did buy the father-in-law copy of David Hepworth's book about Abbey Road, and but I haven't actually read it myself yet, which is a shame. I wonder if there was still that sort of power of the union going on at the time, and the not being able to record past a certain hour was because of strict limits set down by various groups, or it might even have been the old fussy pre-World War II type manager, or saying, oh no, it's not the way we do things. Then thinking that sort of extends into even the 80s, into things like Top of the Pops,
Yeah, yeah.
and the influence of the musicians union in terms of what could and couldn't be performed. But there's a story for another time. So yeah, interesting that they are able to do that, and to make some interesting choices. But I'm glad that they haven't really got the studio nous, perhaps, that they might have had if they'd have been recording elsewhere, in America, perhaps, like the Stones, to have really gone overboard. And there, another little feature that stands out for me that feels like a part of the song rather than a decision of economy, as it had done on previous albums, is the fade out. The
Hmm.
fade out with that vocal line, with the gag of the beep, beep, beep. As you could almost imagine, someone who doesn't have a car but who is driving the car might then be going along in the street going beep, beep, with their voice rather than, anyway, yeah, you get the point. It feels like it's part of the song, and it fades out in a way that is very much in keeping, rather than oh well, we don't want to make this more than 2 minutes, 2 minutes 15. Haven't really got any ideas, so how about we fade out? Has happened a fair amount, I think.
Well, yeah, and but also if you are going to construct a song around this idea of the punchline, and you've delivered your punchline and you've had your comedy moment, you stop. That's how a joke works. So yeah, it has to fade out at that point. Again, structurally, that just makes sense, you know.
Well,
And
you do
it
what Dara
works.
O'Brien does, and you indicate to the audience that now this is your turn to laugh with that. "Arr." You sort of say, "Okay, I'm pausing now." So maybe the beep beep is the that's it. There's the joke, and now
Over to
laugh.
you. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, again, it just sort of back to the construct of the song, the construction of the song, rather. That's how it works. It's another effective little moment. And yeah, you're right. It doesn't feel like it's being done out of necessity. It feels like it's being done because that's exactly how long this song needs to be. And that also is a change worth commenting on. That what slightly sort of occludes that is the fact that this is a very short song. It is only 2.5 minutes long. So you think, well, okay, right, but actually, yeah, it feels like this is what the song does. It's done its thing. It's delivered its punchline. Here's your laugh line. Boom. All right, now it's time for a bit of sitar.
Speaking of things being as long as they need to be, have we missed anything?
Uh, Once again, your subtlety knows no bounds. I don't believe that we have. No.
But what a really kind of refreshing way of starting the album. And of course, we've got some, a run of albums now that's as good as anything in musical history, which is really exciting. So the fact that this project's going to go on until 2045 doesn't seem like quite so long now, really.
No, no, and it is nice to just sort of stepping back from the song slightly, but it is nice to have reached this point in their career and this point in us discussing it because it does give us whole new uh directions to go in, and it's not that everything has been a slog up to now. I would hate to suggest that at any point, but it's really wonderful to have reached this point and have new directions, new styles, new things to talk about, and new approaches which aren't just iterative examples of things that we've had before, but are actually genuinely fresh and new and really rather wonderful.
We haven't spoken about cover versions. Did you seek out any cover versions? Because
I
I didn't.
sat out. I did. There are no good cover versions of this song. Every single one was an absolute pile of shite. The best one I could find was Elmo off of Sesame Street. Nobody interesting has covered this song.
Elmo.
Nope.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Elmo, you can drive my car, which, if that is a euphemism for sex, is really just not right. But anyway, there are no interesting cover versions of this song. I couldn't find a single person about whom I gave a single solitary figgin who has covered this song. So no, no cover versions this week.
But we do have Haruki Murakami's short story collection, which includes short stories called both Drive My Car and Yesterday. And
Yes.
Drive My Car was turned into a an award-winning Japanese film. I mean, award-winning, I think, at the 2021 Cannes Film Festival, where it won Best Screenplay and was nominated for the Palme d'Or. Haven't seen it.
No, me neither.
That's the best I can do with that. But
Oh, I do have one other thing I should mention, which is there is a Beatbugs version of this.
oh, I didn't check. Oh,
Yeah,
how
there's a
remiss of
beatbox
me.
version of Drive My Car. Sorry. So that's the exception, I guess. The exception that proves the rule for the cover versions of the song.
And you can imagine that would make a really nice Beat Bugs episode because
Absolutely.
perhaps someone gets ideas above their station. They think they're going to be a star, but perhaps something doesn't go right. They get pulled back down to earth, and then everyone becomes friends again at the end of it. I mean, it may not be at all like that, but that just kind of feels about right. I like the thought of that.
Yeah.
Nice.
Excellent. Right then. Score, please, sir.
I'm gonna give you an 8 out of 10.
Yep, that's exactly what I'm going to give it as well. Excellent. We have parity.
It's up there with pretty much the best of what we've had to talk about so far. But at least one other song on this album will go higher than that.
Yep, the
I
last song
wonder
you
what
gave
that could be.
The last song you gave an 8 out of 10 to was We Can Work It Out. Before that, Yesterday. And then before that, we're going all the way back to Help. So there you go.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, and yeah. I like the sound of that.
Excellent. Good. Thank you very much. Well, I guess we can wrap it up there. You can really get a hold of us. You can contact us by email. We are BeatlesStuffology@gmail.com. We're on whatever is left of Twitter at Beatles_ology. And we are Beatles Stuffology on Instagram. You can also find my blog at www.jgmcquarrie.scot, where I just write about music, TV shows, movies, or whatever. I'm going through the Bond movies at the moment, so that's exciting. Anyway, please like, rate, and review us on whatever podcast you're using so that more people can find the show. It really does make a difference, so please give us a little poke there. Next week, yes, it's time for the stars to come out as we tackle Norwegian Wood. And as always, we hope you're going to join it for us. But until then, keep listening.